Welcome to this edition of 5-Minute Fix for Elementor and WordPress. In this edition, we're going to be having a look at the Flexbox container and how to align widgets within it easily. Now, if you're new to Flexbox containers, there are times when you may be yearning to go back to the old columns and sections. We would have created this that you see on the screen at the moment previously in sections and columns by inserting 4 columns within a container. And then aligning those, and it all seemed fairly easy. And I think now with Flexbox, people are looking to recreate this kind of layout we see here using buttons and finding it a little confusing. So what we're going to be doing in this edition is to look at creating what we see in front of us here um, in or around about 5 minutes. So I hope you find this helpful. The first thing we're going to do is to delete this whole container here, so I'm going to start from scratch. So let's kick off now by entering a container into that section here. I'm going to keep it boxed. I use a standard width of 1440 pixels these days because we have a proliferation of larger screens. I'm going to give it a minimum height of 200 pixels to start with. It's a Flexbox. I have a beta version of Elementor running at the moment, so I also have the option for the new grid container, but we're going to be sticking with Flexbox, and by the time you watch this, the grid may have made it into production versions, and in many ways what we're going to create would be easier within a grid, but we're going to use Flexbox here, which is entirely practical and possible. So let's just set a background color to this so you're going to be able to see things a little easier. We'll select from our global colors the primary, which is the same as the header here, and within this now I'm just going to check the alignment here. So it is Flexbox, so I'm going to choose direction row, and I'm going to select this option here, which is space between. We'll see how that lines things up in a moment, but it will give you some breathing space between any of the widgets that you put in there, plus align them all evenly. I'm going to align the items vertically in the center. I'm going to keep the gap of 20 pixels between the elements, and this is very important here, this wrap icon, which I think causes a lot of people a lot of confusion within Flexbox. We're going to turn wrap on, and we'll see what happens if we don't. I'm also going to set the wrapped content to Flex Center, and we'll see why as we go through. So there we go. I've set up now our container the way that we want it. I'm now going to take a button widget and pop it in there like so. We'll just give that a little bit of styling again so we can see it. We'll change the background color to one of our other colors, that's text. We'll take the background here to pink. There we go. So I've now got that button in here, and obviously we can set any links to it, we can set the text, but we'll keep it with click here. Now, one of the things that's really important when we're working with Flex and when we want to put things in a line, for example, and I'll show you what I mean. If I just duplicate this now, we'll see that it starts to spread out, and I want 4 buttons in a row. We'll end up with 8, but I want 4 for the moment. So I'm going to keep duplicating. There we go. So I've got 4 buttons now, and because I've used space between in the container settings, that's exactly what it's done. So it's laid them out evenly here. But a lot of people say, well, um, how do I get that, make that button larger? And the secret in in Flexbox, is to click the button, go to Advanced, and set the default to Custom. Now we've got 4 buttons. The container is 100% container width. 100% of the 100% of the available space. So we're going to click on there. We're going to say custom width. We've got 4 buttons. I'm going to make that 25%. Okay. So that's made the container bigger, but it hasn't made the button bigger. So what do we do about that? Well, we go back to our content, and we set the button to justified, and now we have a nice full width button. So let me just, and this is a good tip here if you're doing this kind of thing with multiple widgets, I'm going to copy and paste style into all the other buttons like so. Now, what you'll notice here is that as I duplicated that one, it threw this one down to the next row. But I set this width to 25%, so 4 times 25 is 100. That should fit. But what we have to do, and what we have to make sure we do, is to allow for any margins and padding in there. And I know I've got 20 pixels in there on each widget. So what I'm going to do is take this, instead of 25%, I'm going to make it 23%, and we'll just apply that same style to all of them, and now you see we're nicely aligned like so. Okay, so what happens now, there's our nice buttons for line, and by the way, I'm using buttons here. You can actually use any widget to do this with. It's not just confined to buttons, although this is a particularly common look and feel that you see on a lot of websites. It can be used like so, like we're doing here, is kind of almost like a sub menu. But yeah, you can use any widget you like. So what happens now? How do I create my next row of 4 buttons? Well, that's fairly simple. So let me duplicate this, and like we saw before, it's going to throw it to the new row. That's great. I'm just going to duplicate that a couple more times, and there we go. Nice and simple. Let's just do a little bit of styling here before I show you something else that's worth knowing. We'll make these buttons look kind of cool with this logo up here. So we'll go for a background color here of orange. I want the second button to be the same. Paste style. We'll have this button here staying pink-ish. Let's have a look, see what we've got available. And we'll make this one purple. Paste style. There we go. So you get an idea of how we can do things like that. But what happens then when somebody comes along and says, we need one more button? What happens? Well, okay, no worries. We'll just duplicate this one here. But now I've got 9 buttons, and it all kind of looks a bit weird. So what you can do here is to look at our widget here. You check the settings we've got here. There's a number of things we can do. We can do align it. You can use its own alignment. If you go to click on the widget, go to advanced, we've got the width here. What happens if I try and make that full width? Aha, there we go. Okay, so now this is a way to balance an uneven number of buttons, and maybe this button could be some kind of call to action. You could equally put this at the top of the container there, make it some kind of call to action. That's a good way to do it. But generally, I find if you can possibly have an even number of widgets in there, it makes life a whole lot easier. So that's cool. So we've set that up and we're on desktop now. But what does it look like responsively? Well, I've got an extra breakpoint set up here for tablet landscape. So let's go through and see how they look. For tablet landscape, yeah, I think we can get away with that. We've got sufficient width. Obviously, it depends how much text you've got in these buttons, and I should always try and keep this text here to a minimum. What does it look like tablet? Well, that looks a bit odd. So what do? Well, we're on tablet mode, so maybe we want 2 columns of buttons. Let's see what we do here then. So all we're going to do for tablet view is to go into advanced. We're going to make the width here a percentage, and let's call it 48. I would make it 50, but remember that we've got some padding in there. So I'll copy the style, we'll paste it into there, so that gets us there. Let's paste it, we'll worry about the colouring in a bit. Let's just paste the style here, paste the style there, paste style there, paste style there. It will just keep going on this. Okay. And now we've got this situation where I can just take that now and say copy and paste style into there, and there we go. For tablet view, I've got 5 rows of buttons. Sorry, um, 5 rows, 2 columns of buttons, which I think looks pretty good on that. But what about mobile? Well, mobile, okay, we're going to have to work through this again, and this is pretty quick to do. You've probably guessed by now what we want to do here is look at the width. Instead of custom, we're going to say full width 100%, copy. I'm just going to quickly whiz through this. There we go, and that's probably, whoops, missed one. That's probably as good as we're going to get here for mobile. Actually, mobile is much easier to set up and much more straightforward than tablet in many ways. So there we have it. That's how we align things. Now a little bit of a bonus tip here. Sometimes when you're working in the responsive views, things don't quite look the way you think they might. One good tip here is to shrink down the window, the editor. And a lot of people don't know this is there, but it's a really good way of seeing how things are really going to look. Okay, so there we go. That's a little bonus tip for you. And that just about wraps it up. I hope that was helpful and useful. And obviously, any questions, just please ask them in the thread. I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for watching.